let's move forward a little bit, because then we have the pivotal year of 96 where the cocktail drugs begin to arrive. That was, in some ways, that was a surprise, wasn't it? Because I just remember, even like 6 months before the data came in, the protease inhibitors were being dissed to some extent. They weren't expected to be this successful. Am I misremembering?
You're not misremembering that. I think some of the early candidates, like Vir, et cetera, were actually pretty shitty protease inhibitors. And it wasn't until Merck's drug did a large clinical trial with 3 drugs that we saw for sure that this could be a game
because
changer.
we were told the use of this one protease inhibitor wasn't that impressive. But when you added them to other, when you added 3 or more agents to it, suddenly the data was just not good. It was shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being there at that meeting when David Ho is talking to TAG and giving the Vancouver evidence. So it was just simply breathtaking.
And I just reread that. You wrote about that in your now in the book, infamous article.
Infamous article.
When Plagues End, worst title ever, but it was a decent article. But it was a very personal article. You talked a lot about what you were going through and how it was how this news was changing your world.
Yes, and a lot of people's worlds, because it shifted the paradigm.
Right.
That's all I was saying. It shifts the paradigm.
There's no doubt
and that paradigm
the medical breakthrough in 96 was remains the biggest shift in the paradigm of AIDS thus far until we finally end this thing.
And that had, for me and for many others, a weird psychological impact, because you basically at that point, your whole life, your adult life basically, had been dedicated to this cause, and suddenly it had reached a sort of critical success, in as much as if you could get if more people get access to this, we would be past the worst. And we look at the numbers of deaths, and they do decline markedly. But that presents another thing. What do we do now? Who are we as gay men now? How did I slipped into a depression, my first clinical depression, after my viral load went to 0, which was not what I was expecting. It was psychologically completely bizarre. We'd had this amazing success, and suddenly I felt completely lost. And you did too, right? I mean, to some extent, there was this sense of weird effects of succeeding.
Yeah. I mean, that whole transition out of 96, you write about it well in that article, When Plagues End. I think, by the way, that gets, it's mostly a headline problem. 36 million people have died of AIDS in the world as of this year, and 30 of those happened after 96. 30 million of those happened after 96. So we're still in the middle of this. I mean, the great thing is the death rate peaked in 2004 worldwide and has been slowly inching down since then. We're well under 1 million deaths a year now, and we've got to keep hacking away at that number. But back to your question, I mean, I was still in TAG and struggling with feeling useful there, and was kind of just totally burnt out, frankly. So I walked away and tried to figure out what to do with this future. And that search for the next thing, I thought I'd take my time, and I thought it would be easy, but emotionally it really scared me, because I realized all the ideas I could think of, they all seemed too scary. It was like I had been in this surreal existence. The real world just seemed too intimidating and scary to embrace again. And I did launch a website for people with HIV that I was incredibly proud of. But at the same time, I became addicted to crystal meth. So it was a bumpy
road. You were not the only one, right? There was a certain...
all the guys I was hooking up with around that time, which is 2000 in New York, crystal was having its first big crystal meth. Smoking it per se was having its first big wave, lagging behind the West Coast. San Francisco and LA already had huge meth problems in the gay community, and they were lagging behind Hawaii. It seems to have this slow global shift, and there was none of it in Europe at that time. But all the guys I was hooking up with were guys my age who were HIV positive. It was my cohort. We were all escaping on the same drug. It was fascinating.